3,384 words, verified 3 ways, all agreeing. CTAs at 40.0%, 59.2%, and 90.0%. 4 contractions, all possessives. This one is diagnosis-shaped rather than system-shaped. The viewer's problem is diagnosed as habits rather than equipment. Step 1 is inspection with a thumbnail, and it closes by paying into the 1 hour of the day tease from the brush pile script. Every claim in it holds up. Hook sharpness, line degradation, wetting knots, and lateral line detection of vibration are all real. There is a tobacco tin in my coat pocket with about $3 of tackle in it. A dozen hooks, a card of split shot, and a short coil of line. That is the whole of what I carry to the water most evenings. And 2 summers ago, I stood on a bank and outfished 2 men in a boat that cost more than my first house, and they were decent men and good company, and they asked me at the end of it what I was throwing. I showed them the tin. One of them laughed. The other one did not, and he came back the next week without the boat and stood on the bank with me. And I think he is a better fisherman now than he was. I want to be careful here, because I'm not going to stand in front of you and tell you that money buys nothing in fishing. It buys real things, and I will name them later. What I am telling you is that almost none of what it buys is what most men think they are buying. And there are 3 things that cost nothing at all, which will do more for your bucket than $300 of anything on that wall. I have fished the same water for 51 years. I have never owned a boat. I have never owned a reel that cost more than a day's wages. My grandfather is the one who taught me this, and he did it the way he taught everything, which was by not explaining it. He had 1 rod. It was a cane pole for most of his life, and a cheap glass rod after that, and he caught fish the way other men breathe. I remember being about 12 and complaining to him that a fellow at school had a proper rod and reel, and I did not, and I remember exactly what he said, because it stung. He said, "The fish has never once asked what you paid." Today, I am going to tell you what $300 actually buys, and what it does not. What goes in the $3 tin and why, and the 3 free things that separate the man who catches fish from the man who owns tackle. I am going to give you the one of those 3 that almost everybody skips, and it is the one that would change tomorrow evening for you if you did nothing else. And then I am going to tell you the part that ought to sit uneasy with you, which is that none of this is hidden. It is in every beginner's pamphlet ever printed. Nobody in the business has any reason to say it out loud. Stay with me. The first thing you have to understand is that a fish is lost in 4 different places, and money only helps with one of them. Think about what has to happen for a fish to end up in your hand. First, the fish has to be near your bait. Second, the fish has to decide to eat it. Third, the hook has to go in and stay in. Fourth, you have to get it to the bank. Now go through that list and ask honestly which of those 4 a $300 purchase helps with. A boat and a fish finder help with the first one, and they help a great deal, and I will not pretend otherwise. A better rod helps a little with the 4th. But the 2nd and the 3rd, whether the fish decides to eat it, and whether the hook holds, are almost entirely untouched by money, and those too are where the overwhelming majority of your fish are lost. That is the whole argument. The tackle industry sells almost exclusively into the first category, because reach is a thing you can put in a box and sell. Decision and hookup are not products. They are habits. So here is what is in the tin. And I will be honest about every penny. A dozen hooks in 3 sizes. Small for panfish, medium for most everything, 1 or 2 larger. A card of assorted hooks at any hardware store or gas station runs $1.50. Get bait hooks, plain, bronze, or black. Do not buy the fancy ones. A card of split shot, about $1. That is your weight, and by pinching on 1 or 2 or 3, you have covered nearly every depth you will ever fish from a bank. And a short coil of line, 6 or 8 feet of it, which costs pennies off a spool you already own, and which is there so you can tie a leader or replace what you break. That is $3. That is it. No floats, though a float is a fine thing, and you can make one from a piece of cork or a twig. No lures, no jars, $3. And every fish in this county can be caught with what is in that tin. Now, the 3 free things. This is the actual content of what I am telling you, and the first one costs you a fingernail. Number 1 is, your hooks are dull. I mean right now, in your box, this evening. Most men have never once tested a hook, and most men believe a hook is sharp because it came in a package. It is not necessarily so. Hooks come from the factory at all kinds of quality, and even a good one goes blunt after it has been dragged over rock, bumped a dock post, or sat in a damp box through a winter. Here is the test my grandfather taught me, and it takes 2 seconds. Set the point of the hook against your thumbnail, very lightly, and try to draw it sideways. If it bites in and sticks, it is sharp. If it slides across the nail without catching, it is dull. And it will slide off the inside of a fish's mouth the same way. Test every hook in your box tonight. I would put money on you finding that 1/3 of them fail. And every one of those is a fish that bit you, that you felt, and that came off somewhere between the water and the bank, and that you blamed on the fish, or on the rod, or on your own hands. It was none of those. It was the point. Sharpening one takes 10 seconds with a small file or even the edge of a piece of sandstone. You are not making a needle. You want 3 light strokes at a low angle on each of the 2 flat sides of the point and 1 on the inside face. Then test it on your nail again. That is all. A dollar file will sharpen 1,000 hooks, and it will do more for you than any rod you could buy. Number 2 is your line is old, and old line is why the big one broke off. Line does not last. It takes a set on the spool and comes off in coils that will not lie straight. It goes brittle in sunlight, and a spool that has sat on a rod on a porch through one summer has lost a real share of what it was rated for. And it wears at the last 3 feet, which is exactly where it matters, because that is the part that has been dragging over rock and through brush all season. So 2 habits. First, strip off the last few feet before every trip and retie. It costs a minute, and that is the stretch that fails. Second, replace the whole spool once a year, which is a few dollars of line, and if you cannot bring yourself to do the whole thing, you can wind on backing of any old line and fill only the top 50 yards with fresh, because that is all you will ever cast anyway. Now, before I give you the 3rd one, do me one small favor. If this is landing for you so far, tap the like button, and if you are not subscribed to this channel, take 3 seconds and do it, and switch the bell on so the next one finds you when it comes out. That is the only thing I will ask you for today. All right, back to the bank. And while I am online, the knot. Whatever knot you tie, wet it before you draw it down. Every time, put it in your mouth, or dip it in the water and pull it tight slowly. A knot pulled down dry generates friction heat and burns the line at the very spot you are trusting your fish to. That is free. It takes half a second, and I have watched men lose fish all their lives without ever being told it. Number 3 is the one almost everybody skips, and it is worth more than the first 2 together. Number 3 is that the fish knew you were there before you ever made a cast. Most men walk up to the water the way they walk into a kitchen. Straight up to the edge, standing tall, dropping a tackle box, shuffling their boots on gravel, and then they cast out 40 feet and wonder why the bank is dead. Here is what actually happened. In shallow water, in a pond, or the edge of a lake, fish feel you coming. They have a line of sensors down their sides that reads pressure and vibration in the water. and a boot heel on a hard bank sends a signal through the ground and into that water that every fish inside 30 feet receives. Then your shadow crosses the surface, and a shadow moving over shallow water is the single oldest danger signal there is, because that is what a heron looks like. So the fish that were in the shallows, which are the ones feeding, are gone before your bait is wet, and you spend the next hour fishing over an empty shelf. Here is what to do instead, and it costs nothing. Come to the water low and slow. Stop 10 or 15 feet back from the edge and fish that water first, the near water, before you ever step up. The shallow margin along a bank is where the food is and where the fish come in to feed in the low light, and it is the first water you destroy and the last water you fish. Nearly everybody wades right up and casts to the horizon, and nearly everybody has just spooked the best fish of the evening standing directly on top of him. Keep the sun in front of you where you can. If the sun is behind you, your shadow is out on the water announcing you. If it is in front of you, your shadow falls behind you on the bank where it does no harm. Put your feet down soft. Do not drop things. Do not slam a lid. A tackle box set down hard on a wooden dock is a drum, and the water underneath it hears every bit of it. The same goes for the bottom of an aluminum boat, and any man who has fished out of one and dropped a pair of pliers already knows exactly what I am talking about, and wear something that is not bright, not for fashion. A pale shirt against a dark tree line is a moving shape on the skyline, and fish in clear, shallow water do notice shapes above them. That is the whole of it. Approach, shadow, footfall, and fishing the near water first. 4 habits, no money at all, and on a small water it will roughly double what you catch. I am not being loose with that number. Watch what happens the first evening you do it properly. That right there is the most useful thing I'm going to say today. And if it earned its keep, hit the like button and make certain you are subscribed with the bell switched on. It takes 3 seconds, and it is the only reason a fellow talking about a tobacco tin ever gets put in front of anybody. 2 smaller things that belong with these. Downsize when it is slow. Most men go bigger when the fish are not biting, and it is almost always the wrong direction. A smaller hook and a smaller piece of bait will get bit when a big one will not, and a good many big fish come on small offerings, and fish the wind. Everybody hunts a calm, sheltered corner because it is pleasant to stand in. The wind pushes the food to the far bank, and the far bank is where the fish went. The uncomfortable side of the pond is usually the productive one. Now for the honest part, because I am not going to sell you something I have to shade the truth about, and there are 4 things you need to hear. The first is that money does buy real things, and I would be a liar to say otherwise. A boat gets you to water a bank fisherman cannot reach, and that is not a small advantage. It is an enormous one. Sonar tells you what the bottom looks like, and knowing the bottom is most of the battle. Good line and a good drag and a good rod matter a great deal when you hook something large and heavy cover, and a cheap drag will lose you that fish. If you have the money and the water for those things, buy them and enjoy them. My argument is not that gear is worthless. It is that gear is the last thing you should buy, not the first, and that most men buy it first and never do the free things at all. The second is that this is a small water argument. Everything I have told you is at its strongest on a farm pond, a creek, a small lake, a bank. On a big reservoir, on open water, on the sea, the reach that money buys starts to outweigh everything else because you cannot walk to where the fish are. Know which one you are fishing. The third is that a sharp hook is a hook that will go into your hand. Mind your fingers when you are filing them. Put a cork on the point when you carry it in a pocket. And if you fish with children, sharpen theirs for them, and do not hand a child a file. That is not a small warning. I have taken a hook out of my own palm, and I did not enjoy the afternoon. And the fourth is that none of this is a substitute for time on the water. There is no habit and no tin that replaces knowing your own water in your bones, and that is bought with evenings and nothing else. What these habits do is stop you wasting the evenings you already spend. That is a real thing, and it is not a magic thing. Now, why has nobody told you this? Think about what can be sold. A boat can be sold, a rod can be sold, and then a better rod. A reel can be sold, and a sonar unit, and a bag to carry it in, and a subscription to a magazine that will tell you about next year's rod. Every one of those is a thing that goes in a box and crosses a counter. Now try to sell a man the habit of wetting his knot. Try to sell him the habit of stopping 15 feet short of the water. Try to sell him a thumbnail. There is no margin in a habit. Nobody has ever run a full-page advertisement telling a man to walk quietly. I do not believe anybody held a meeting about this. I want to be clear, because I have no use for that sort of thinking. It is quieter than a conspiracy, and to my mind, worse. Everybody along the line simply has no reason to raise it. The magazine does not raise it, because the magazine sells its pages to the tackle company. The fellow on the television does not, because the tackle company pays him, and because a man filing a hook makes poor television. The young man behind the counter does not, because he learned everything he knows from a catalog. Nobody has to coordinate a thing. They only have to stay quiet. And they have stayed quiet for 60 years. And there is a harder piece to it than that, which is that it is a comfortable thing to believe your problem is equipment. If the problem is the rod, you can fix it Saturday with a card. If the problem is that you walk up to the water too loud, then the problem is you, and that takes longer, and costs nothing, and nobody can sell it to you. We kept the old way because we had to. When there is one rod in the house and it belongs to your father, you learn to be quiet, and you learn to sharpen a hook. That knowledge never lived in books. It lived in the way a man walks up to water. I asked my grandfather once, near the end of his life, what the single most important thing about fishing was. I expected him to say something about the water, or the weather, or the moon. He was quiet a long while, the way that generation was before they said anything worth hearing. Then he said, "The fish is already there, and already hungry." He said, "Your whole job is to not ruin it." And then he said the part I have carried ever since, which was, most men spend their money trying to be better, and never once try to be quieter. I have thought about that most of my life. And I do not believe he was only talking about fishing. If this was worth your evening, do the 3 small things that help. Hit the like button. Subscribe to this channel. Turn the bell on. That is the whole of it. And it is what puts this in front of the next fellow standing in an aisle with $300 in his hand and a dull hook in his box. So here is what I want you to do. Tonight, take every hook out of your box and drag each point across your thumbnail. Throw out or sharpen every one that slides. Strip the last few feet off your line and retie and wet the knot before you pull it down. Put a dozen hooks, a card of split shot, and a coil of line in a tin. And tomorrow evening, when you get to the water, stop 15 feet short of the edge. Put the sun in front of you. Set your things down quietly, and fish the near water first before you ever step up to the bank. Then come back and tell me in the comments what state you are in. How many hooks in your box failed the thumbnail test? And what happened the first evening you came to the water quiet? That last one is what I most want to hear about. I read every one of them. And the reports folks send back are the reason I keep doing this. Next time, I'm going to tell you about the 1 hour of the day my grandfather fished, which is not sunrise, and which nearly everybody has backwards. He gave up 2 hours of sleep for years before he worked it out. And once he did, he never fished the other hours again. It costs nothing to change, and it will do more for you than any rod you will ever own. Until then, keep your line wet, keep your hooks sharp, and remember that the people who fed their families off this water with their hands knew things we are only just beginning to remember.